There are places in this world that don't follow the rules of time, towns that vanish without explanation, and clocks that tick when no one is left to hear them. Elm Ridge Hollow was one such place, a forgotten town lost to history, sealed away from maps and memory. No survivors, no records, just silence and the sound of ticking. But some stories refuse to stay buried. In this audio horror experience, we follow journalist Mara Klein as she uncovers the truth behind a reclusive clockmaker, a labyrinth of time loops, and a town that never moved forward because it was trapped in a moment that never ended. This is the Clockmaker's Lament, a tale of obsession, sacrifice, and a place where time itself has stopped living. Put on your headphones, turn off the lights, and listen carefully because the clocks are still ticking. It began with a letter. Yellowed paper, trembling handwriting, sealed with wax that cracked like dry skin. It was found behind the wall of an abandoned house on the edge of a forgotten town called Elm Ridge Hollow, a place erased from maps and memory decades ago. The letter read, "If you're reading this, it's already too late. The clocks are still ticking, but no one remains to hear them." No name signed at the bottom. Just a symbol, a clock face with only one hand, pointing straight down. What followed would become the last recorded mystery of Elm Ridge Hollow, a town that never truly disappeared, but instead stopped living. Years passed without any sign of life, yet every time someone ventured into the town, they returned with the same strange evidence. Clocks still running, perfectly synchronized, though no electricity had powered the area for decades. Some explorers claimed they heard whispers between ticks. Others said they saw their reflections move slightly out of sync. Most came back changed. One never came back at all. His camera was recovered weeks later, still recording. The footage showed nothing but static and a rhythmic ticking sound that seemed to grow louder over time. Then came Mara Klein, a journalist driven by obsession. She wasn't looking for ghosts or urban legends. She was chasing truth, and she found something far worse. Her investigation started with the letter, but it quickly spiraled into something deeper, something ancient. As she dug through old records, newspaper clippings, and police reports, she discovered that Elm Ridge Hollow hadn't just been abandoned. It had been sealed off, not by law, not by nature, but by something else entirely. Something that didn't want anyone to come in, or perhaps didn't want anyone to leave. Her first night in the town, she set up camp in what remained of the local library. As she sat by her small lantern, she noticed the grandfather clock in the corner was moving, its hands slowly inching forward, despite having no power source. She watched it tick away the seconds, but the numbers on the face weren't normal. There were 13 numerals instead of 12, and the second hand moved backward. That was when she realized that time here didn't follow the rules she knew. Time here was broken, twisted, trapped. And somewhere deep within the town, someone was still winding the gears. Mara wandered the empty streets of Elm Ridge Hollow, her boots crunching softly against the gravel-strewn road. The building stood frozen in time, windows intact, doors closed, curtains drawn. Yet there was no life, no birds, no wind, no movement, just silence, broken only by the constant ticking that echoed from every direction. She walked past the old diner where the menu board still listed prices from 1978. The coffee cups on the counter were untouched, dustless, as if someone had just stepped away for a moment. In the schoolyard, swings swayed slightly, though there was no breeze. The chalkboard inside one classroom held an unfinished math problem, half erased, as if the teacher had been interrupted mid-lesson. Mara recorded everything, whispering notes into her microphone, trying to make sense of the impossible. She described how every clock she passed seemed to watch her, not metaphorically, but literally. Their ticking changed rhythm when she approached. Some whispered names. Others played faint music that made her dizzy. One even chimed midnight at noon. She wrote in her journal, "The clocks aren't telling time. They're counting something else. Souls, hours left to live? I don't know, but they're waiting for someone." And then, deep within the town square, she found the first real clue, a gravestone engraved with a familiar name, her own. Mara Klein, it read. Still ticking. She backed away slowly, heart pounding. Something was wrong, very wrong, and the clocks were watching her. At the heart of the mystery stood Elias Varnum, a reclusive clockmaker who once lived in the tallest house in Elmridge Hollow, a narrow three-story structure with blackened windows and a roof that seemed to sag under the weight of forgotten years. He was said to have crafted timepieces so precise they could measure the heartbeat of the universe itself. But Elias wasn't just a clockmaker. Locals whispered he was something else, a man obsessed with stopping death, bending time, and creating a world where the past never faded. Some believed he had discovered a way to trap souls inside clocks. Mara read through old town records she found tucked away in the abandoned post office. They were yellowed, brittle, but legible enough. According to the documents, Elias had arrived in Elmridge Hollow in the early 1940s, claiming to be an inventor from Switzerland. No one knew how he got there or why he chose such a remote town. What was certain, however, was that within a decade of his arrival, strange things began happening. People started vanishing without explanation. A school teacher named Clara Hensley disappeared mid-lesson. Her students swore she simply stopped speaking mid-sentence and then blinked out of existence. A farmer named Thomas Reed was last seen walking into the woods at dawn. Only his boots were ever recovered, standing upright in the same spot for weeks before rotting away. And all these events happened near Elias's workshop, where the ticking of unseen mechanisms filled the air like a distant heartbeat. Elias himself became more withdrawn as the years passed. Children reported seeing him late at night, wandering the streets alone, whispering to the walls of houses as if they could hear him. Some even claimed he spoke directly to clocks, winding them with trembling hands and muttering words no one could understand. Then came 1978, the year the town vanished. No one knows exactly what happened on that day. There were no reports of fires, earthquakes, or evacuations. One morning, the people of Elmridge Hollow were gone. Their homes remained untouched, their meals still steaming on tables, their radios playing music that looped endlessly. And yet, not a single soul was left behind. Only the clocks kept running. And Elias, he was nowhere to be found. Some say he took the entire town with him. Others believe he became part of it. But Mara knew one thing for certain. Elias Varnum was still here, watching, waiting, winding. Mara wandered deeper into the town, her footsteps echoing against the silence. She had come prepared, recording equipment, notebooks, a camera mounted on her chest. But nothing could have readied her for what she was about to experience. Every clock she passed seemed alive. Their ticking changed rhythm when she approached. Some grew louder, others softer, as though adjusting to her presence. A few emitted faint whispers, voices too low to fully understand, but unmistakably human. Others played soft melodies that made her dizzy, disoriented, as if the notes themselves were unraveling her thoughts. She paused in front of a wall-mounted clock in what used to be a barbershop. Its face was cracked, its numbers worn down by time. Yet the second hand moved with eerie precision, sweeping forward in perfect, mechanical intervals. As she leaned closer, she heard it, a whisper, not coming from around her, but from inside the clock. It said her name. Mara. She stumbled back, heart pounding. The sound was quiet, almost gentle, but it carried an unnatural weight, like someone calling from the other side of a closed door. She recorded everything, narrating her fear, her confusion, and the growing realization that the clocks weren't just keeping time, they were counting something else. Souls? Hours left to live? She didn't know, but they were waiting for someone, and now they had noticed her. She continued walking, trying to shake off the sensation crawling up her spine. Every step brought her closer to the center of town, where the largest building stood, a looming Gothic-style church with a shattered bell tower and stained glass eyes that followed her movement. In front of the church, embedded in the stone path, was a small plaque. Time waits for no one, but I do. Mara stared at it for a long moment. Then she stepped forward. Behind her, every clock in the town chimed at once. Midnight, even though the sun was high in the sky. Inside the basement of Elias's home, Mara found a hidden door behind a grandfather clock. The mechanism clicked softly as she pushed it aside, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. She descended slowly, her breath shallow, her flashlight casting long shadows along the stone walls. The air grew colder with each step, thick with dust and something else. Something metallic, like old blood. At the bottom, she found herself in a room lined entirely with mirrors, dozens of them, some framed in silver, others cracked or warped beyond recognition. In the center stood a massive clock, black as obsidian, its hands moving in slow, deliberate ticks. The moment she entered, the temperature dropped sharply. Her breath misted in the air. She turned on her recorder and whispered, "This is Mara Klein. I'm inside what appears to be a secret chamber beneath Elias Varnum's house. It's filled with mirrors and a central clock. The air is freezing, and I can hear something." She paused. From somewhere deep within the room, a faint sound echoed. Laughter. Children's laughter. High-pitched. Giggling. Then crying. Then screaming. Mara backed toward the entrance, but the door slammed shut behind her. She spun around, heart hammering, and turned back to the mirrors. That's when she saw it. Each mirror reflected something different. One showed the town burning, another showed Mara, older, hollow-eyed, standing among the clocks. Another showed Elias, alive, watching her. And in the largest mirror, she saw herself. But her reflection wasn't looking at her. It was staring at the clock. Then slowly it turned, smiled, and mouthed the words, "You're next." Mara couldn't move. Her reflection smiled at her, frozen in place like a painting that had suddenly come to life. Then, as quickly as it appeared, the image shifted again. The mirror rippled like water disturbed by a pebble, and the reflections changed. Now she saw flashes of the past, moments stitched together like film reels flickering in fast motion. A woman brushing her hair in front of a vanity, only for her face to melt away mid-stroke. A group of children playing hide-and-seek in the town square, their laughter turning into screams as they vanished one by one. A man standing in front of a clock tower, arms raised as if pleading with something unseen, before collapsing into a pile of gears and bone. Mara pressed her hands to the glass, trying to steady herself, but the cold seeped into her skin, numbing her fingers. She felt lightheaded, as if the very air in the room was being drained away. She turned to the massive clock at the center of the room. Its ticking had slowed now, each beat stretching out like the toll of a funeral bell. Then it rang 13 times. With each chime, the mirrors cracked further, spiderwebbing outward until the entire room was filled with the sound of shattering glass. Mara screamed, covering her ears, but the noise didn't stop. It grew louder, sharper, like nails scraping across porcelain. When the final ring ended, silence fell once more. The mirrors were intact again, but now they were empty, no reflections, just darkness. And in that darkness, something stirred, something watched, something remembered. Mara's camera cut out for 30 seconds. When it resumed, her voice was panicked. "I saw him, Elias. He was standing by the old train tracks wearing his coat. He looked at me, smiled, and then he was gone." She searched for him, but found only a trail of broken pocket watches leading into the woods. Each one ticked louder than the last. Mara followed the trail of broken pocket watches into the woods. Each one was different. Some gold-plated, others rusted beyond recognition, but all ticking with an eerie synchronicity. As she walked deeper into the forest, the trees grew taller, their branches twisting together like fingers clasped in silent prayer. The air became thick, heavy, as if time itself was pressing down on her shoulders. She checked her compass, but the needle spun wildly, never settling on a direction. She marked her path with chalk, carving small notches into tree trunks. Yet no matter how far she walked, she always found herself back at the same clearing, the one where the first watch had been placed. It was as if the forest was alive, shifting around her, guiding her in circles. She tried retracing her steps, but every turn led her further in. The sound of ticking grew louder, more insistent, until it seemed to come from everywhere at once. the leaves, the wind, even her own chest. She stopped walking and pressed her hand against her heart. It wasn't beating normally. It was ticking. Panic surged through her veins. She took out her camera and recorded what she could, whispering updates to whoever might be watching. Her voice trembled as she described the impossible loop, the unnatural silence between ticks, and the way the shadows moved just slightly ahead of her footsteps. Then she saw it, a tree carved with numbers and names. At first they looked random, meaningless, but then she noticed a pattern. Dates, birthdays, and beneath them, short phrases, still ticking. Not yet chosen, trapped in time. Her breath caught when she spotted her own name etched into the bark. Mara Klein. Underneath it, in freshly carved letters, still ticking. She stumbled back, heart pounding. The forest was keeping track of everyone who entered, and now it was tracking her. After hours of wandering, Mara finally found something new. A hatch hidden beneath a cemetery plot, marked only by a single cracked clock face engraved into the stone. She pried it open with trembling hands, revealing a narrow shaft lined with rusted metal rungs descending into darkness. She hesitated only briefly before climbing down. The air grew colder with each step, damp and metallic, filled with the scent of oil and decay. The walls vibrated with a deep rhythmic pulse, like a heartbeat echoing from somewhere far below. After what felt like an eternity, her feet touched solid ground. She turned on her flashlight and swept the beam across the cavernous space. She stood in a massive underground chamber filled with gears the size of houses, turning slowly in perfect unison. Chains hung from the ceiling like vines, connecting unseen mechanisms that groaned under the weight of their endless motion. The floor was paved with polished brass tiles, each engraved with tiny faces frozen in expressions of terror or awe. At the center of it all stood a tower made entirely of clocks, some wooden, some metal, some bone. Gears clicked and whirred inside its many levels, and at the very top, a single bell tolled once every hour. Mara stepped forward cautiously, her boots clicking against the floor. Every movement echoed unnaturally, as though the room itself was listening. She reached out and placed her hand on the base of the tower. Instantly, the ticking around her changed. Faster, sharper, almost excited. Inside the tower, she found journals, dozens of them, stacked neatly on shelves built into the walls. They were all written in the same precise handwriting, Elias Varnum. She opened the first one. The pages were filled with sketches of clocks, diagrams of time loops, and notes about people he had met. Children, travelers, investigators. All of them had come here. None had left. She flipped through entry after entry, reading his obsession grow with each passing year. He spoke of time not as a river, but as a prison, a labyrinth, a machine that could be rewound, reset, controlled. But there was always a cost. Each experiment came with a price. In the town of Elmridge Hollow, it had become his greatest sacrifice. Mara sat cross-legged on the cold brass floor, flipping through the journals with growing dread. Each page was filled with meticulous handwriting, diagrams of impossible machines, and cryptic warnings scrawled in red ink. Elias Varnum had been more than a clockmaker. He had been a scientist of time itself, obsessed with unlocking its secrets, no matter the cost. One journal entry caught her eye. Time is not a river, it is a labyrinth, and I have found the key. He believed time was made of layers, moments stacked on top of each other like pages in a book. With the right mechanisms, one could flip through them, read the past, even rewrite it. But there was a cost. Each time he opened a new page, something bled through. Something old, something hungry. Another entry detailed his first experiment, a pocket watch tuned to a specific second in time. He used it to bring back a memory of his dead wife, Clara. But what returned wasn't just a memory. She stood in his workshop, eyes hollow, skin cracked like porcelain. She whispered his name, then screamed until her throat tore open. Ilias sealed the watch in lead and buried it beneath the town square. Mara swallowed hard, her throat dry. This wasn't just a town trapped in time. It was a tomb, a prison, a gateway. She kept reading. Elias wrote of children who came to him, or rather were drawn to him by the ticking. They come in dreams, he wrote. They want to see the gears turn. They want to understand. He built them tiny clocks. He gave them lessons. He called them the children of the gears, but they never left. She turned another page. There was a list of names. Some were familiar. Others were hers. Mara Klein. Underneath it, still ticking. Mara stared at the list of names, her breath shallow, her pulse ticking in sync with the surrounding machinery. There were dozens of entries, names of people she didn't recognize, dates ranging from the 1940s up to just a few years ago. Some were accompanied by short descriptions. Vanished mid-step, became part of the mechanism, never left the mirror, and then she saw it again. Her name, Mara Klein, written in the same neat, looping script as the rest. Beside it, still ticking. She turned the page quickly, desperate to find more information. But instead of text, she found drawings, crude sketches of children standing in front of clocks, their eyes replaced with spinning gears, their mouths stitched shut with silver thread. One image showed a group of them gathered around a central figure, Elias, handing him pieces of themselves in exchange for knowledge. She flipped through more pages, more drawings, more names, more disappearances. Mara's stomach twisted as she realized what she was looking at. These weren't just stories, they were records, proof that Elias had been collecting people for decades, drawing them in with the promise of understanding time, only to trap them within it. She remembered the whispers she had heard earlier, soft giggles, distant cries, the echo of running footsteps that never reached her. Children, calling out from inside the clocks. She stood up abruptly, clutching the journal tightly. The ticking around her had grown louder, more urgent, as if the tower itself knew she had discovered the truth. She needed to leave. Now, but the door behind her slammed shut, and from somewhere deep within the tower, a child's laughter echoed. Software, playful, hungry. Mara ran. She bolted through the underground chamber, her flashlight casting wild shadows across the walls. The air pulsed with the rhythm of countless ticking clocks, each one synchronized like a heartbeat in a monstrous body. She reached the ladder and climbed as fast as she could, her muscles burning with exhaustion, her mind racing with fear. When she emerged from the hatch, gasping for fresh air, she found herself not in the cemetery, but in a completely different part of the forest. The trees were thinner here, spaced apart like tombstones, and scattered across the ground were hundreds of small clocks, buried, broken, bleeding. She knelt beside one and pulled it from the earth. The lid popped open, and a child's laugh echoed from inside. She dropped it immediately. The sound continued, bouncing between the trees like an echo trapped in time. She backed away slowly, scanning the clearing. Every clock ticked differently, some fast, some slow, none in sync. Some played faint music, others whispered softly in languages she couldn't understand. A few simply ticked in silence, their faces blank, their hands missing. She realized what this place was, a graveyard, not for bodies, for lost souls, preserved in gears and glass. And then, from the corner of her eye, she saw movement, a flicker, behind a tree, a child's silhouette, watching her, smiling, with a clock for a face. Mara stumbled out of the forest and back into the town, her breath ragged, her skin clammy with cold sweat. She could still hear the faint laughter echoing behind her, not from the woods, but from somewhere deeper inside her own mind. The clocks had changed her. She could feel it now. The rhythm of time no longer flowed around her, but through her. Every heartbeat was measured. Every breath counted like seconds on a dial. She needed answers. She entered the nearest building, an old schoolhouse with peeling paint and shattered windows. Inside, the air was thick with dust and silence. Desks were lined up neatly, chalk still fresh on the board, as if a lesson had been interrupted mid-sentence. A clock hung above the blackboard, its hands frozen at exactly 3:33. Mara approached it cautiously, camera rolling. As she reached out to touch the glass face, the ticking around her changed. It wasn't coming from the clock. It was coming from the walls. She pressed her ear against the plaster. A soft, rhythmic sound pulsed beneath the surface. Slow at first, then faster, as if something deep inside the house was waking up. She backed away slowly, heart pounding. Then came the whisper. Not from the clock, not from the walls, from inside her head. "Let me out!" Mara spun around, scanning the room, but there was nothing there. Just empty desks, silent books, and the ever-present ticking growing louder and louder. She grabbed her journal and started writing furiously. There's something behind the walls, something that wants to be let in, or maybe it wants to get out. She began tearing off wallpaper, knocking on drywall, searching for hidden doors or compartments. Most of it was solid, until she reached the far corner of the classroom. There, behind a bookshelf, she found a panel slightly warped, as if something had pushed against it from the other side. She placed her hand on it. The ticking stopped. Silence fell, and then a single knock echoed from within. 1, 2, 3, then nothing. But Mara knew. Something was listening, and it was waiting. Mara didn't sleep that night. Instead, she sat in the abandoned schoolhouse, flipping through Elias Varnum's journals by the dim glow of her flashlight. The entries grew more erratic as the years passed. His handwriting tighter, more desperate. He spoke of experiments gone wrong, of people who vanished mid-step, of clocks that whispered secrets no human should know. One entry stood out. "I have built a clock that dreams. It does not tick, it breathes. And in its breath, I see what lies beyond the veil." Mara felt a chill crawl down her spine. She remembered the massive black clock in the underground tower, the one that had pulsed like a heart when she touched it. Had she already found it? She closed the journal and stared at the wall where the knocking had come from. The silence was oppressive now, heavier than before, as if whatever had been behind the wall was holding its breath. She got up and walked outside, needing air, needing space. The town was eerily quiet, the usual ticking absent for the first time since she arrived. Then she heard it. A different sound. Software rhythmic. Breathing. She turned sharply. Behind her, standing silently in the moonlight, was a clock. Tall, black, its face blank except for a single eye-like lens in the center. And it was breathing. In and out. Slowly. Deliberately. She took a step closer, mesmerized despite herself. The moment she did, the lens flickered. Inside, shadows moved. Faces floated within the darkness. Twisted, screaming. One of them looked exactly like her. Mara staggered back, heart hammering. The clock opened its mouth. Not literally, but somehow she could see it forming words without lips, without sound. It said, "You are part of the dream now." Then it disappeared, vanished into thin air, leaving only silence and the echo of ticking, growing louder once again. Mara returned to Elias's journals, desperate for answers. She flipped through pages filled with diagrams of impossible machines, notes about time loops, and cryptic warnings scrawled in red ink. But one passage stood out, longer than the others, almost like a final confession. To escape death, one must become untethered. To do this, the eyes must change. The world must be seen not in light, but in motion. He described eyes that turned into hourglasses, slow, steady, forever falling. "I did it," he wrote. "I became timeless, but now I can never return." Mara's stomach twisted. She thought back to the mirror room, how her reflection had smiled at her, how it had seemed to move independently. Had Elias done something to himself? Had he transformed into something else? She checked her reflection in a broken shard of glass. Her pupils were normal, but when she blinked, for just a second, they looked like gears, spinning, counting, watching. She slammed the shard onto the floor and backed away. This place was changing her, rewriting her. She needed to leave. Now, but the door behind her slammed shut, and from the hallway, footsteps echoed. Measured, precise, like a metronome counting down to something inevitable. Mara followed the sound of the footsteps, her pulse matching their rhythm. They led her to a house she hadn't noticed before. No windows, no doors, just a smooth, seamless structure made of dark wood and stone. The roof sloped inward like a skull cap, and the entire building seemed to pulse gently, as if alive. She stepped closer. The house exhaled. A low groan filled the air, like creaking wood and grinding gears. She pressed her hand against the wall. It pulsed beneath her fingers. Then came a voice. "You're not ready yet." She yanked her hand away and stumbled back. The house inhaled, then exhaled again. With each breath, the ticking inside her grew louder. She ran, but the town was shifting around her now. Buildings rearranging themselves, streets looping back on themselves, the sky curling inward, like a spiral drawn in ink. She was trapped. Not just in the town, in time itself. Mara found herself at the edge of town, near what used to be the train station. The tracks stretched into the horizon, disappearing into a fog that never lifted. Trains sat on the rails, untouched by rust or decay. Their doors were closed, their windows dark. She climbed aboard the nearest one. Inside, everything was preserved. Seats intact, luggage stored, newspapers folded neatly on laps. No passengers, no signs of struggle, just silence. At the front of the train, in the conductor's booth, she found a ticket stub. Destination, nowhere. Departure, yesterday. Arrival, never. The conductor's seat was warm. He wasn't far. She backed out quickly, heart racing. Outside, the wind howled, and from somewhere deep within the fog, a distant chime rang. Once, twice, 3 times, then silence. Mara realized something chilling. This train had never left. It had never arrived. It had simply stopped. Just like the town, just like time, and just like everyone else who had come here. She was beginning to stop too. Mara wandered toward the center of town again, drawn by something she couldn't explain. The sky had grown darker, not from clouds, but as if the light itself was being drained away. The air was thick with silence, broken only by the ever-present ticking that now seemed to come from inside her chest. She found herself standing in front of what used to be the town church, its steeple gone, replaced by a gaping hole in the sky. Inside, the pews were untouched, dust-free, as if someone had been sitting there just moments before. But it wasn't the eerie stillness that caught her attention. It was the rope. Hanging from above, connected to nothing, was a single bell rope. No ceiling, no structure above, just the rope, dangling down like a lifeline into the void. She hesitated, then pulled it. Nothing happened. No sound, no movement, just silence. She stepped back, confused. Then came the choking, a sudden, violent pressure around her throat. Invisible hands tightening, cutting off her breath. She clawed at her neck, gasping, falling to her knees. Her vision blurred, her lungs burned, and through the haze she saw something in the reflection of a stained glass window. Her own face, but her eyes were gone, replaced by clock faces, spinning, counting, waiting. Then as suddenly as it began, the pressure vanished. Mara collapsed onto the floor, coughing violently, tears streaming down her face. She looked up at the rope, still hanging, still motionless. But when she touched her neck, her fingers came away red. Rope burns, fresh, bleeding. Something had answered the bell, and it didn't like visitors. Mara stumbled out of the church, her body trembling from the encounter. She needed to find Elias, or whatever remained of him. He was the key to everything. The town, the clocks, the people who had vanished without a trace. As she walked, she passed a shop window covered in dust. She wiped a section clean with her sleeve and stared at her reflection. Only it wasn't hers. Behind her, standing silently, was Elias Varnum, He was older than she imagined. Pale skin stretched tight over sharp bones, silver hair slicked back, eyes dark and empty. He wore his signature coat, the one described in old records. Black, long, stitched with golden thread forming the shape of gears and numbers. He smiled. Mara spun around. No one was there. She turned back to the window. He was still watching her, smiling. Then he pointed at the wall behind her. She turned again, heart pounding. There, scratched into the plaster in deep, jagged letters, were the words, "You're running out of time." Mara backed away slowly, her breath coming in short, panicked bursts. She grabbed her camera and recorded everything, whispering updates between gasps. "He's not real," she said. "He can't be real. He's a reflection, a hallucination, just a trick of the mind." But deep down, she knew better. Elias was here, not in flesh, not in spirit. In time, he existed outside of it now. And he was watching her, waiting, winding, preparing. For what? She didn't want to know, but she would soon. Mara returned to the town square, drawn by an unseen force. The ground beneath her feet felt softer than before, almost spongy, like walking on damp paper. She stopped at the exact center, where the cracked stone path formed a spiral etched into the earth. It was made of tiny gears, all turning slowly in the same direction. She stepped onto it. The air shifted. The sky darkened. The horizon curled inward like the edges of a burning photograph. She tried to move, but her legs wouldn't obey. The spiral pulsed beneath her, humming with a low frequency that vibrated through her bones. It wasn't just a pattern carved into the ground. It was alive. A gateway, a vortex, a door to something beyond time. She fell, not down, into. The world twisted around her, buildings folding in on themselves, clocks melting like wax, shadows stretching into impossible shapes. She screamed, but no sound came out. Her voice had been swallowed by the void. Then came the voices, whispers, dozens of them, hundreds, calling her name. Some familiar, some not, all trapped, all waiting. She landed hard on cold stone, gasping for air. Around her, walls of ticking gears loomed high, their movements synchronized like a heartbeat. She was underground again, but this time, she wasn't alone. Figures stood in the distance, silhouettes wrapped in darkness, their eyes glowing faintly like candlelight behind glass. They watched her, silent, patient, waiting for the next tick. Mara rose slowly, her limbs stiff, her body aching from the fall. The city around her was unlike anything she had ever seen. Towering structures built from interlocking gears, streets paved with polished brass, and massive clocks suspended in the air, chiming in perfect unison. People moved through the streets, or rather figures that once might have been people. Their faces were blank, expressionless, their bodies draped in tattered robes embroidered with intricate patterns of time. They carried small clocks in their hands, cradling them like infants. One of them approached her. It paused just inches away, tilting its head as if studying her. Then it spoke. "We are the lost. We are the frozen. You will join us soon." Mara took a step back, but the figure followed. More surrounded her, closing in slowly, silently. She whispered into her recorder, "I've entered another layer of the town. It exists beneath the surface. A hidden city ruled by time itself. These people, they're not alive. Not in the way I understand life. They're echoes, trapped." She turned to one of them, gripping its arm. "Who are you?" she asked. The figure blinked once, then answered, "Time forgot us, so we became part of it." Its voice was soft, distant, as if spoken through layers of static. Mara realized the truth. These weren't ghosts. They were the missing dot. Everyone who had disappeared from Elmridge Hollow over the years, they hadn't left. They had been absorbed, rewritten, preserved within the gears of time, and now she was among them. Elias appeared again, preserved within the gears of time, and now she was among them. Elias appeared again, this time in person. He stood at the edge of the city waiting. His form was more solid than before, but something was wrong. He had no shadow. Mara approached cautiously, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're real." Elias tilted his head. "I am, and I am not." He gestured toward the city around them. "This is my creation," he said. "My masterpiece. Time perfected. No death, no decay, only rhythm." Mara shook her head. "This isn't life. This is a prison." Elias smiled sadly. "Life is a prison too. Death is simply the escape. I found a third option." He stepped closer, his eyes locking onto hers. "You can learn to control time," he said, "but you must pay the price." Mara backed away. "What price?" Elias extended his hand. "You must remove what makes you human. Your memories, your emotions, your soul." Mara stared at him. "No," Elias frowned. "Then you will remain here, forever." Behind her, the city stirred. Clocks began to chime, and the walls started closing in. Elias stood before Mara like a specter caught between moments, his expression calm, his eyes void of time. He raised one pale hand and gestured toward the towering gears that loomed over them like ancient monoliths. The city beneath the clocks pulsed with lifeless rhythm, every tick echoing through the air like a heartbeat from another world. "You were not meant to come here," Elias said softly, his voice reverberating through the metal corridors. "You were meant to remain outside the loop." Mara clenched her fists, trying to steady herself against the weight of what she had seen. Around them, the silent figures watched, their blank faces reflecting nothing but the slow turning of gears. "I came looking for answers," she said. "I found only questions." Elias nodded, as if he had expected this. "Then let me teach you," he said. "Let me show you what I have learned." He turned and walked toward a large stone archway, built into the base of a massive clock tower. Mara hesitated, then followed. Inside, the chamber was lined with tools. Tiny knives, silver needles, delicate gears no larger than a pinhead. On the walls, diagrams detailed how to remove memory, how to sever emotion, how to replace human essence with mechanical precision. "This is how we become timeless," Elias explained, "by removing what makes us weak." Mara stared at the tools, her stomach twisting. "No," she whispered, "this isn't right." Elias stepped closer. "You fear change because you still believe in death. But death is only an ending. What I offer you is something else entirely." He reached out, placing his cold fingers on her chest. She felt it. Her heart was ticking, not beating, ticking. "I've already started," Elias murmured, "and soon, you will be part of the rhythm too." Mara stumbled back, her breath shallow, her pulse a frantic ticking that echoed louder with each second. She had to get out. Now Elias didn't stop her. He simply watched, his empty eyes filled with something that wasn't quite amusement nor sadness, just inevitability. She bolted through the chamber, past rows of suspended clocks, each one containing flickering images of people who looked eerily familiar. Some were crying, some were screaming silently. Others stared blankly, their mouths moving without sound. She ran faster, through tunnels of interlocking gears, past staircases that led nowhere, through rooms filled with frozen screams. She finally reached a door. It was locked. On it, a riddle carved into brass. What waits forever but moves in a second? Mara's mind raced. Time. Of course. She answered aloud. Time. The lock clicked. The door creaked open. Fresh air rushed in. Freedom. She stepped forward. But the moment her foot crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind her. Trapped. Again. Mara spun around, pounding on the door, but it wouldn't budge. The room she had entered was small, dimly lit by the glow of countless clocks lining the walls. Each one bore a name engraved into its frame. She scanned them. Some were old, decades-old names etched in rusted metal. Others were recent, fresh letters carved into polished brass. One caught her eye, her own. Mara Klein, underneath it. Still ticking. She backed away slowly, heart hammering. The ticking around her changed. Faster now, more urgent. She picked up one of the clocks. The moment her fingers touched it, it screamed. Not a whistle, not a chime, a human scream. She dropped it immediately. The glass shattered. From the pieces crawled a creature made of wire and teeth. Its mouth moved, whispered her name. Mara scrambled backward, knocking over shelves, sending dozens of clocks crashing to the floor. With each break, another whisper escaped. Voices overlapping, calling her name in endless repetition. She grabbed another clock. Desperate, reckless. It burned her hand. Inside, she saw herself, older, alone, watching clocks tick. She threw it across the room. The door slammed shut again. No escape, only echoes. And ticking. So much ticking. Mara pressed her back against the wall, breathing hard, sweat dripping down her temples. The creature made of wire and teeth was gone, dissolved into the shadows the moment the clock shattered. But the whispers remained, crawling along the edges of her mind. She needed to move, needed to find a way out. She reached for another clock, smaller this time, wrapped in dark velvet. She unwrapped it carefully. Inside, the face was cracked. The hands twitched erratically. Then, without warning, it screamed again. Not just sound, something deeper, something inside her head. She clutched her ears, falling to her knees. The scream tore through her thoughts like broken glass. Memories flashed. Her childhood bedroom, her mother's voice, the first time she held a camera. All of it unraveling. Then silence. She opened her eyes. The clock was gone. In its place, a mirror. Dark, reflective, empty. She leaned in. At first, there was nothing. Then, a figure appeared behind her, smiling, its face half human, half gear. It whispered, "Tick." Mara fumbled for her camera, desperate to record everything. Her hands trembled as she turned it on, adjusting the lens to capture the mirror behind her. The figure was still there, watching, waiting, its face shifting between human and machine. She took the shot. The flash blinded her for a second. When her vision cleared, the mirror was empty. Just her reflection, shaken, pale, alive. She checked the photo. It showed the room, the clocks, the shelves, the darkness. But in the background behind her was a clock with 13 hands, and one of them pointed directly at her. She gasped, dropped the camera. It landed with a soft thud. Then the ticking stopped. For the first time since she arrived, the rhythmic pulse of time ceased. Silence, heavy, final. Then came the bell. Once, twice, 3 times. 13. Mara realized with chilling clarity. She had passed the final threshold. There was no going back. Elmridge Hollow had claimed her. Now she was part of the town, part of the ticking, forever. The bell rang 13 times, each chime reverberating through the chamber like a funeral knell echoing across eternity. With every toll, Mara felt something inside her shift, as if the very fabric of her being was unraveling, thread by thread, and rewinding into something else entirely. The walls pulsed with a slow, mechanical rhythm, the gears embedded within them turning faster now. Their motions synchronized with the ticking that had become a second heartbeat in her chest. The silence after the final chime was heavier than before, thick with anticipation, like the moment just before a storm breaks. Alias appeared again, standing at the far end of the room, his expression unreadable. "You've reached the threshold," he said softly. "Beyond this point, there is no return." Mara tried to speak, but her voice caught in her throat. Her body felt heavier, slower, as if time itself was pressing down on her, weighing her soul. Alias stepped forward, his shadowless form gliding across the floor without sound. "This town exists in a crack between seconds," he continued, "a place where time does not flow, but folds in upon itself. You are inside a heartbeat that never ends." He gestured toward the mirror behind her, where the clock with 13 hands still pointed directly at her. "The 13th hour has begun," Elias whispered. "If you stay past the next ring of the bell—" He paused, tilting his head slightly, as if listening to something only he could hear. "You will become part of the town forever." Mara's heart pounded. Or perhaps it was just the ticking now. She couldn't tell anymore. She took a step back, then another, but the door behind her slammed shut. No escape, only time, and the inevitable. The bell rang again, once, twice, 3 times. Each chime sent a shockwave through Mara's body, rattling her bones, vibrating through her skull like a tuning fork struck too hard. The air shimmered around her, distorting reality, bending space until the edges of the room blurred into nothingness. She fell to her knees, clutching her head as images flooded her mind. Flashes of people she didn't know, places she'd never been, moments that hadn't happened yet. Or had they? Her own face appeared in one vision. Older, hollow-eyed, standing among the clocks, whispering names that sounded familiar, but were lost before she could understand them. She gasped for breath, trying to steady herself, but the ground beneath her was shifting, folding inward like paper being crumpled. Elias stood over her now, watching silently. "You're slowing," he said. "Your body's adjusting." Mara looked at her hands. They were moving slower. Each movement delayed, stretched out like film played at half speed. She turned to Elias, panic rising in her chest. "What's happening to me?" He tilted his head. "You're becoming part of the rhythm." She shook her head violently. "Number, I won't let this happen." Elias sighed. "You already have." Another chime rang out. 4, 5, 6. The ticking in her chest grew louder, faster, closer. It wasn't just in her anymore. It was all around her. Inside the walls, beneath the floor, above the ceiling, everywhere. And then she realized the truth. Time was no longer passing around her. She was inside it, trapped, forever. Mara forced herself to stand, though her limbs resisted, sluggish and uncooperative. Each movement required effort, as if she were wading through water made of seconds instead of liquid. The air was thick with sound, not just ticking, but whispers, voices layered atop one another, speaking in languages both known and forgotten. Elias watched her struggle with quiet amusement. "There is still a choice," he said. Mara turned to him, eyes wide. "What choice?" she demanded. "You've trapped me here." Elias shook his head slowly. "I offered you knowledge," he replied. "I gave you understanding, but you rejected it." He stepped closer, his presence looming despite his frail appearance. "You can still choose," he said. "Join us. Become part of the rhythm. Learn to control time." He extended his hand, or did he? His fingers blurred, shifting between human and mechanical, gears forming and dissolving in an endless cycle. "Or," he whispered, "fade into silence." Mara stared at his hand. She knew what it meant. To accept would mean surrender. To refuse. She didn't know what refusing meant anymore, because time had stopped waiting, and now it was coming for her. Mara's gaze shifted from Elias's outstretched hand to the mirror behind her. The clock with 13 hands still pointed directly at her, its gears grinding with a slow, deliberate rhythm. She remembered the first clock she had found, the one with a single hand pointing straight down. The key. She reached into her bag with trembling fingers, pulling it free. Elias's expression changed. For the first time, he looked alarmed. "No," he whispered. Mara tightened her grip around the small clock, feeling the weight of history in her palm. It was warm now, pulsing faintly in time with the ticking in her chest. She wound it, just once. The effect was immediate. The walls trembled, the gears screeched, the ticking faltered, and then the air split apart, not with fire, not with light, with sound. A deep, resonant tone filled the chamber, vibrating through every surface, shaking the foundation of the city beneath the clocks. A doorway appeared, not of wood or stone, but of pure light. Beyond it, the real world waited. Mara hesitated. Behind her, Elias screamed, "No, you can't open it!" She ignored him. She turned the key, and jumped. The moment Mara crossed the threshold, everything shattered. Clocks exploded, gears flew, the walls cracked. The city beneath the clocks collapsed into itself, consumed by the force of whatever she had unleashed. The labyrinth of time twisted and folded, collapsing into a singularity of ticking echoes and broken memories. She screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the void. Her body was pulled in all directions at once, stretched, compressed, unraveled, rewound. She saw faces flash before her eyes, people she had never met, places she had never been, versions of herself that never existed. And then, darkness, silence, stillness. When she opened her eyes, she was lying on the cold floor of the abandoned house. The letter was gone. So was the camera. All that remained was her journal and her heartbeat, which still ticked. Mara landed hard on the cold wooden floor of the abandoned house. Her breath came in short, ragged gasps, her body trembling as if she had just survived a fall from unimaginable heights. For a moment, all she could do was lie there, staring at the cracked ceiling, listening to the sound of her own heartbeat, or what passed for it now. It still ticked, not like before, loud, rhythmic, unnatural. She sat up slowly, her limbs stiff, her mind reeling from what she had just experienced. The underground city, the ticking figures, Elias Varnum. They were real, or had been, but now she was back, or so she thought. The room around her was exactly as she had left it. Dust-covered furniture, broken windows, the lingering scent of rust and old wood. But something felt off. The silence was too thick, too deliberate, as if the world itself was holding its breath. She reached for her camera instinctively, only to find it missing. Gone. Like everything else she had brought with her into the labyrinth beneath the clocks. Her journal was still there, though. Clutched tightly in one hand, the pages wrinkled from sweat, filled with frantic notes she barely remembered writing. She flipped through them. There were entries about the forest that never ended, the mirror room where reflections moved without her, the train station with no destination, and then the last few pages, blank, except for one line, scrawled in shaky handwriting. If you're reading this, it's already too late. A chill crawled down her spine. She wasn't out. Not really. Elmridge Hollow hadn't let her go. Mara stood slowly, gripping the edge of a nearby table for support. Her legs wobbled, weak from whatever she had just endured. She needed to leave. She needed to get far away from this town and never look back. She stepped toward the door, then stopped. Outside, the sky looked wrong. Too dark, too still. The trees swayed gently, but there was no wind. She opened the door and stepped outside. The town remained eerily unchanged. No signs of decay, no bird song, no movement. Just silence, broken only by the ever-present ticking that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. She walked forward, careful not to run, afraid that sudden motion might trigger something unseen. She passed the diner, the schoolhouse, the church, all untouched, all waiting. She reached the town's edge. The road stretched ahead, winding into the forest beyond. She took another step, then another. But when she looked up again, she was standing in front of the same house, the abandoned one, where she had started. No footprints in the dust, no sign of movement, just her and the ticking. Still, always, forever. Mara tried again and again. Each time she followed the same path, marking trees, leaving behind small objects, even carving symbols into the ground. But no matter how far she walked, she always returned to the same place, the center of Elmridge Hollow, trapped in an endless loop. She recorded everything she could, speaking into her journal as if someone, somewhere, might hear her. I don't know if I ever truly left. Maybe I'm still inside. Maybe I never escaped. Time here isn't linear. It folds in on itself, trapping people in moments that never end. I saw others, lost souls caught in the rhythm, forced to repeat their final seconds forever. Elias said he found a way to stop death. He did. But at what cost? I think I'm becoming part of it too. My heartbeat still ticks. My reflection moves before I do. I see things in mirrors that shouldn't be there. If you're hearing this, don't come here. Don't try to understand it, because once it starts, it never stops. She closed the journal with trembling fingers. Behind her, the clock tower chimed. Midnight, even though the sun was high in the sky. Mara sat on the steps of the abandoned house, watching the shadows stretch across the empty street. She knew she couldn't keep going in circles forever. She had to face the truth. She was still inside the town, still trapped within its frozen time. She opened her journal one last time, dipped her pen in ink, and began to write. If you're reading this, don't come here. Don't look for answers. Don't listen to the ticking, because once it starts, it never stops. She stared at the words for a long moment, then added one final line beneath them. I was never meant to leave, and neither will you. She closed the book, set it beside her, and waited. For what? She didn't know. Perhaps for the next person who would find this place, or perhaps for Elias, or maybe for the ticking to finally match the rhythm of the town, and for her to become part of it, forever. Elias Varnum vanished the moment Mara crossed the threshold, or so she thought, because now every night she sees him, in dreams, in mirrors, in the corner of her eye. He stands silently watching her, his expression unreadable, his hands always moving, winding invisible gears, adjusting silent mechanisms. Sometimes he speaks, other times he simply smiles, and always he leaves behind the same message. You're still ticking. She knows now that he never left the town. He became it. His obsession with stopping time turned him into something more than human, a presence woven into the very fabric of Elmridge Hollow. And now she is part of it too. She hears the whispers in the walls, sees the echoes in the glass, feels the weight of time pressing down on her bones. She is no longer just a visitor. She is part of the rhythm, part of the ticking, part of the legend. And one day, when the 13th hour rings again, she will return to the city beneath the clocks and wait forever. Time doesn't heal all wounds. Sometimes it traps them. Elmridge Hollow isn't cursed. It's preserved, frozen in a perfect tick, forever. Mara no longer sleeps. She doesn't need to. Her body still moves, her voice still speaks, but deep down, she knows she is not what she was. She walks through the town like a ghost with purpose, not haunting, but watching, listening, waiting. The clocks continue to tick, not just in the town, inside her. Each beat of her heart matches their rhythm. Each breath drawn follows the same measured cadence. She is no longer Mara Klein, the journalist who came searching for truth. She is part of the mechanism now, and the mechanism never stops. Every night she wanders, the empty streets, past the diner where time never moved forward, the schoolhouse where lessons were left unfinished, the church that rang no bells. She sees the reflections in windows that move before she does, hears whispers from behind walls that have no source, feels the weight of unseen eyes following her every step. But she does not run anymore, because there is nowhere to go. She tried once. She followed the road beyond the forest, marked trees with knives, buried objects as markers, even carved her name into stone. Every time she returned, to the center, to the ticking, to the waiting. This place is not bound by geography. It exists outside of space, inside a moment that never ends, a heartbeat frozen mid-beat, a breath held forever. And now she's part of it. Just like Elias, just like the others, just like those who will come after her. And they will come. They always do. Someone always wants answers. Someone always listens to the ticking. And once it starts, it never stops. Mara sits on the steps of the abandoned house where it all began. Her journal rests in her lap, open to its final page. Her pen hovers above the paper, trembling slightly as if resisting the final act. She speaks softly, knowing someone might be listening. Somewhere. Maybe you. Maybe the next one. If you're still awake, You're not safe because the clocks are still ticking, and one day they'll start counting you. She pauses, then continues writing. I don't know how many days have passed. Time here doesn't measure itself in sunrises or shadows. It measures in ticks, in echoes, in moments stolen from people who wandered too far. Elias believed he could stop death. He did, but he didn't realize that stopping death also meant stopping life. He created a prison without bars, a world without endings, and filled it with souls who never asked to stay. I thought I escaped. I thought I made it out. But escape implies freedom, and I am not free. I am still ticking, and so will you. She closes the journal gently, pressing her hand against the cover as if sealing it shut forever. Behind her, the clock tower chimes, once, twice, 13 times. She smiles faintly, then stands and begins to walk, back into the town, back into the silence, back into time. You're still listening, aren't you? That means you haven't heard it yet, the ticking, but maybe you felt it, a strange rhythm in your chest when you're alone at night, a moment that feels like it stretches longer than it should, a mirror that shows something just slightly off. Don't ignore it, because once you notice it, once you listen, there's no going back. Elmridge Hollow is not a place on any map. It is a moment in time that refuses to pass, a heartbeat that never finishes, a breath that never ends. And it is always waiting for someone new, someone curious, someone brave enough to seek the truth, or foolish enough to believe they can escape it. So if you hear the ticking, if you feel the rhythm pulling you in, if you find yourself standing in front of an old house with a single clock inside, run. Before the 13th hour rings, before the mirrors begin to whisper, before the town remembers your name, because once it does, you'll never stop ticking. Mara's final words echo through time. If you're still awake, you're not safe, because the clocks are still ticking, and one day, they'll start counting you. The journal closes slowly, its leather cover worn and cracked with age. A faint breeze that isn't there stirs the dust in the air. The room fades away, replaced by a darkened mirror, leaning silently against a forgotten wall. In its cracked surface, something moves, just slightly out of sync. A reflection that isn't quite right. It watches, waits, then disappears. The screen darkens again, and a clock tower emerges from the shadows, standing alone in a town frozen in time. Its hands inch forward with painful slowness until they reach 13. One final chime rings out, deep, heavy, endless. The sound wraps around everything like a cold breath at the edge of memory. Then comes silence, and from that silence a whisper rises, not loud, but clear. You're still ticking. More whispers join it, overlapping, growing in number, echoing from every direction at once. Names, thousands of them, some familiar, some unknown, but they all belong to those who listened, who came too close, who stayed too long, and now you've heard it too. So don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Hidden Dimension AI, hit the bell so you never miss another descent into the unknown. Because if you've made it this far, you might already be part of the rhythm. The ticking continues.